Hi, my name is Tabitha Ogango from Gifted Hands School. Today I discuss the domains of learning and how they could help you in your decision making as you make choices about where your learners should go to school and what kind of opportunities you should expose them to. The traditional definition of education is that education is the process of acquiring or receiving knowledge, skills, and attitudes. That definition was heavily informed by the three domains of learning, which are cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The cognitive domain of learning refers to the intellectual aspect of learning. The affective domain refers to the emotional, the aesthetic, where we form our values and our other impressions. And the psychomotor refers to the physical, the skill-based, the things we do with our physique. And again, learning is expected to happen in that area. So in an educational process, it is very important to keep our eyes keenly on the three domains, the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. A good investigation of the opportunities that exist for the development of the learner in those three areas is very important. And remembering that education is a process, and in our general setting, we would divide it into 4 segments and say there are the early years, then the primary schooling years, then the secondary schooling years, then the tertiary education years with all the divisions and the segments that exist there. It is therefore very important to always remember that at every level in the education process, the learner is growing in the 3 areas. The learner is growing mentally, the learner is growing emotionally, and the learner is also growing physically. And so the opportunities that are offered for their education need to be in sync with their development. Some years ago, we had a lot about IQ, but recently there has been a lot more discussion on EQ, the emotional quotient. And as an educator, it's very interesting to note that as information becomes available, people then begin to appreciate the complexity of the human person. And whereas many times the schooling process was seen to be a cognitive process, so it had a lot to do with what kind of knowledge do you have, and writing exams and passing them, there is more acceptance now of people realizing that for lack of a better expression, we used to be told you could be an educated fool. As in you could have everything, you have the PhDs and everything, but in all other areas you cannot function because probably your affective domain was not well developed, or your psychomotor, areas were not developed. I think the tragedy of this whole segmenting of the domains and preferring some over others would be the underdevelopment of the human person. So it is important that we always think that the human person is a complex being and needs to be developed in all the 3 areas. Now, to inform our development and how we would assess a good educational offering in the different segments, you will remember that I said earlier that good educators always want to know at the end of this process, at the end of this lesson, at the end of this activity, what am I expecting to see? And there is a classification of objectives, learning objectives in education. And one of the ones that we have used a lot is called the Bloom's taxonomy, which defines or discusses the educational learning objectives from their how objective they are, how complex they are, how specific they are, and just wanting to inform educators that it is important to know, if I am working with a set of learners, what level of objectives should I be considering? Allow me to focus today on the early years, and I will consider early years to be from I could call it from birth to 7 years, but let me say many children will go to school maybe at 2 years, those who go to the reception, the play group, or at 3 years, and then all the way to 7 years. I know that in many discussions, the 6 and 7 years are put in the primary school, and that is still okay. But in terms of child development, I would want to call that one segment, because children will develop in different ways. And sometimes you might find a child at 5 doing something that a 6 or 7 year old could do. And you could find a child at 7 who is operating at the level in certain areas of a 5 or 6 year old. And that is okay. I love to use the example of farming, or if you planted flowers, you would put them out maybe in the same section with the same soil and give them all the same opportunities. But now when the flowers begin to come out and they begin to bud, you will discover that every one of them opens in their own way. And there is nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, they come into full bloom and they achieve what they were supposed to achieve. So it is good to look at children in the same manner, so that we have a guideline. Yes, we know what milestones children should be having at 2 years, at 3 years, at 4 years. But we need to also be sensitive to the fact that people are different, and people will open up in different ways. And then there are early bloomers, there are late bloomers, and there are different reasons why some people will struggle with some things that others will not. And so when we talk about the early years, and if I would ask a random question to you, what is it that would characterize a wonderful early years program? My question would go back to, when you look at that child, let's talk about maybe the years between 2 years and 4 years. What do you see their cognitive ability to be? What do you see their affective ability to be? What do you see their psychomotor ability to be? Now that will begin to inform you on what activities would be unacceptable for that age group, or what activities would be necessary to help them grow. And so you'll find that a good early years program will have a lot of activities that involve the psychomotor, and not very complex, because again, their fine motor skills are not that well developed. So, you're giving them things that will enhance the growth of the psychomotor. They are modeling, they are sticking, they are, using big implements. If they are to write, they shouldn't be using the regular small pencil, because they are still, we would call it clumsy. But what we really want to say is that their level is that they are happier to hold bigger things than little things. And so when we investigate an early years program, you want to go into an early years section, and when you look around the environment, you want to be convinced that whoever is offering this opportunity is aware that these children's psychomotor development is important. And so play becomes a very important aspect of this level of education. And so whatever they are being taught, it will be very good if it involved play and movement, so that they continue to flex their muscles, as it were. When we consider where they are at in terms of their affective development, that at that point they are still very closed in their world, and it's me, and mine. And so much as we want to help them to learn how to share and to take turns, you want to see that they are beginning in a place where everybody has their resources. When we are doing something, we all have the same resources, and we can work on them without the emotional harassment of scarce resources. And I want that one, how comes I want the blue one and I can't have the blue one. We want to guard the emotional aspect of these babies as they begin. When it comes to cognitive, and we look at the Bloom's taxonomy, for example, at this point we are not expecting too much memorization, because the brain is at the level where, we would say seeing is believing, or out of sight, out of mind, So what they see, they interact with it that time, and then tomorrow you need to present it again. In the afternoon, you need to present it again. So the whole concept of repetition, it can sound like nothing is happening in there. They are singing the same song the whole month, or they are saying the same rhymes. Is that really right? The truth is, that is what they need, because that is the level of the cognitive development that these children are at. Now, when we operate in systems where we rush them, it creates a problem for the next level, because then the children have not yet explored fully one section, and then we are expecting them to count for us 1 to 20 or something like that. So all I'm saying, with the early years, we need to be careful that we are deliberate about opportunities that help them to flex their muscles and to develop their psychomotor. We are deliberate about giving them emotional stability. The issue of children crying all the time in school, or when they are going through their educational processes, is not a good thing, because nobody cries when they are happy, and we want to create a healthy emotional base for them, for where they are going in life. So we want to be sure that the caregivers know that when a child is crying or when a child is unhappy, it is important to move in and sort out that situation. When it comes to the cognitive, repetition. They need to repeat, they need to mimic, nothing that is really demanding for them to remember a lot, but opportunities that make them repeat so much that in the days to come, we may be thinking, oh, they really have good memories, but the truth is that somebody presented that material over and over again until the children got very comfortable with it. So in the early years, there is now that segment of the very little ones. Then as they begin to grow, now they just from reciting and all, now they can remember a few things, and up, they keep going up the ladder of the learning objectives taxonomy in a manner that helps them to seamlessly just grow. We will continue with these discussions on the domains of learning vis-a-vis the developmental stage of the learners, to help us to continue to interact with what are the relevant opportunities and activities that should be present in a good educational environment at the different stages of the education process.